Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time seeing my face, my name is Phoebe. So in this video, I'm going to show you guys how I was able to recreate this look. I was inspired to make this top after seeing a picture on Instagram. If you notice, the corset was made as a result of different African prints mixed together, like a patchwork. But in my case, my own fabric came as a whole. It had different colors of the same pattern. So I just utilized the patterns to the full. I just went ahead to freestyle and create my own look. So if you're interested in this video, please do keep on watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And with that, let's get right into the video, guys. Right here, guys, I have gone ahead to mark down all my vertical measurements on my pattern paper. This is the front. I have marked out the chest line, the bust point line, the underbust line, and the waistline. For the back, I have also gone ahead to mark out my zipper allowance, my chest line, and my waistline. So because this is an off-shoulder corset top, I'm going ahead to mark down 6.5 inches right there from the edge of my paper. So I'm just going ahead to mark out the measurements across that area, and then I'm going to connect the lines together like this. At my waistline, I'm just going to mark half of my bust band measurement right there, plus half an inch. That will be 4.25 for me. And I'm also going to mark the same thing at my underbust, at my bust point line, also at my chest line right there. And I'll mark the same thing right there at the 6.5 inch mark that I marked from the edge of my paper. Next, I'm just going ahead to mark 4-inch extension from my waistline right there. Then I'm also going to mark my bust band measurement divided by 2 plus half an inch right there at the new line, and I'm going to connect all the points together. After that, I'm going to mark 1 inch below my bust point line, and at my waistline, I'm going to take a dart of 0.75 inch on both sides of the line right there. I'll repeat the same thing at the 4-inch extension line too, and repeat the same thing right there at my underbust line. Next, I'll connect the lines together. Then right there at my 6.5 inch mark, I'm going to tighten my chest area also by marking 0.75 inch on both sides of the line. Then I'm going to make a connection from that point using the curved part of my ruler to my underbust. So I'm going to make this connection also on the other side too, like this. Next, I'm just going to connect the line right there at my chest line to 1 inch below my bust point. Next, I'm going to measure right there from the center of my paper to my first dart line right there. Whatever I have, I'm just going to pick it like that and place it on my second dart line. And then I'm going to mark out 1/4 of my bust circumference measurement, and that will be 9.5 inches for me. So I'm going to go to the waistline and also do the same thing, measuring what I have from the center of my paper to my first dart line. Whatever I have, I'm going to pick the tape measure right there and place it on the second dart line right there. And then I'll mark out the 1/4 of my waist circumference, which is 8 inches. I'm just going ahead to repeat exactly the same thing that I did on my waistline on the 4-inch extension line. Next, I'm going to make a connection from my chest line to my waistline, and then from the waistline, I'm going to connect straight down to the 4-inch extension line. So for my neck depth, I'm marking 1/2 inch above my chest line like this. I'm just going to connect the points like this. So guys, I realized that I didn't mark the space in between my two corset cups. So I'm just going ahead to mark 1/2 inch right there at my chest line. And I'm also going to mark out 1/2 inch right there at my bust point line. So I'm also going to go to my neck depth, which is 1/2 inch above my chest line, and mark the same thing. Then I'm going to reconnect the line like this. So this is a new neckline for me. So after reconnecting the line, I'm just going to extend that 1/2 inch line to the center of the paper. Next, I'm going to mark 1 inch above my chest line to create the armhole. So I'm going to connect from my chest line to that 1 inch mark that I just made. So this line will form the armhole for the front of the top. Next, the distance between my bust point and underbust is 3 inches. So right there at my bust point line, I'm going to mark out these 3 inches in a slanted manner. And also I'm going to add 1/2 inch to that 3 inch mark and mark the point right there at my bust point line too. Next, I'm going to mark 1.5 inch inwards from my chest line like this. And I'm going to use my ruler to connect the points all the way down to my underbust. So I'm just going to extend that 1/2 inch at my neck depth to my bust point line. After that, I'm going to connect from my bust point line to my underbust like this. So this will form the second cup for the corset. So I'm going ahead to mark 1 inch side seam allowance at my chest line. And I'm also going to add 1 inch side seam allowance at my waistline, and I'm going to repeat the same thing at the 4 inch extension line like this. And after that, I'm going to connect all the lines together. So guys, next I'm going to mark out the difference between my front length and back half length at my bust point line. That is 1 inch. So I've marked that below my bust point. And I'm going to mark 1 inch right there away from my bust span measurement. And I'm going to connect these 2 points together. I'm just dividing the line into 2 and making a connection to the 1 inch mark away from my bust span measurement. After that, I'm going to mark an extension of 1/2 inch right there, and I'm going to reconnect the line back into my side seam allowance. So I'm just going to go ahead and extend my dart line all the way into the extension line. Next, I'll be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance to the hem of the top. So once I'm done, I'm going to connect the lines together, and I'm also going to extend my dart lines like this, and also my seam allowance line too. So I'm just going ahead to cut through the waistline like this, and then I'm going to cut through the darts. I'm going to cut the darts all the way to 1 inch below my bust point line. After that, I'm going to label my cut pieces as A and B. Next, I'm going to close my bust darts. In my previous video, I have shown how to close the bust darts. So I'm just going ahead to do that, and then I'm going to use my paper tape to close up the dart. So guys, while closing the dart, you can see that the line at the B cup has shifted. So I'm just going to use my ruler to reconnect the line like this. So next, I'm just going to go ahead and cut out my pieces like this. So guys, I'm done cutting. Next, I'm going to place the 2 bigger pieces together, making sure that the lines are both connected at the same point, and I'm going to close that area together with my paper tape, making sure that the lines match up. I'm doing the same thing right here at the back of the pattern. So Remember that my extension is 4 inches and there's a 1/2 inch sewing allowance right there. At my side seam, I'm going to mark the 1/2 inch hemming allowance for the top right there, and then I'm going to reconnect that line straight down to the center of my paper like this. After that, I'm going ahead to cut out the pattern piece. So guys, I realized that I made a mistake right here. So I'm going to correct it. I'm going to mark out my 1 inch side seam allowance right there at the 1/2 inch sewing allowance for the top. Then I'm going to reconnect the lines back. So this is the point that I'll be working with now. Then I'm going ahead to cut off that point, and this will become the piece that I'll be working with. After that, I'm just going ahead to mark out the style lines for my boning channel. So it depends on what you want. So just go ahead and freestyle, just do whatever you want. But just know that the more boning channels you create, the more work for you. So I'm going ahead to mark my second point, and I'm going to slash through the lines like this. After cutting, I'm going to label my pieces as 1, 2, and 3 so I don't forget. So using an arrow sign, I'm going to indicate the areas where I'll be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance. So I'm just going to do that all around the pattern. But note that I won't be adding seam allowance to the hem of the top because I have already done that while drafting the pattern. Right here, I'm going to mark down 3 inches on my A cup like this. And I'm also going to do that right on the B cup too. After marking the points, I'm just going to place the 2 cups together, making sure that the points both meet up at the same point. And then I'm going to close up the 2 patterns like so. Next, I'm going to make a connection right there at my bust point line over the 3 inch mark that I just made, and I'm also going to make that connection down to the other part of my bust point line like this. After making the connection, I'm going to label them as C and D respectively. Next, I'm going to cut out the patterns like this. Always make sure you label your pattern so that you don't end up getting confused. At the point, I got confused despite labeling mine, but I just had to work around it and I was able to get the right cups. So these are all the pattern pieces for the front. We're going to move on to the back now. For the back, I'm going ahead to mark my bust span divided by 2 plus 1/2 inch at my waistline, and I'm also going to mark the same thing at my chest line. And for the dart, I'm going to mark 1 inch below my chest line. This is where my dart is going to end. And after doing that, I'm going to connect the points together. Next, I'm going to mark a dart of 1/2 inch on both sides of that line, making a total of 1 inch, and then I'm going to connect the lines like this. For my back neck depth, I'm just going to mark 1.5 inch below my chest line like this. After doing that, I'm going to mark out 1/4 of my bust circumference right there at my chest line. That will be 9.5 inches. Next, I'm going to make a connection right there at my chest line to the neck depth for my back. After doing that, guys, I'm going to go to my waistline and mark what I have right there. I'm just going to pick that up and place that on the second dart line and mark my waist circumference just like I did for the front. Then I'm going to add 1 inch side seam allowance at my waistline and also 1 inch side seam allowance at my chest line, and then I'm connecting the lines together. To tighten the chest line at the back, I'm going to mark 0.25 inch on both sides of that dot line so that the corset remains firm at that area. After that, I'm going to reconnect the lines back into the dot line at the waist. So I'm adding 1/2 inch seam allowance to the waistline right here. Once I'm done, I'm going to connect the lines together. After that, I'll be extending my zipper allowance line, my dart line, and my side seam allowance line to the new line at the waist area. So I'm just going ahead to cut out the back pattern like this, cutting through the side seam, also the neck depth for the back, and I'm also going to cut out the dart for the back too. After cutting, I'm going to label my back pieces as 1 and 2, and I'm going to use an arrow sign to indicate the areas where I'll be adding 1/2 inch seam allowance while cutting on my fabric. So guys, this is what we have for the back at the end of the day. Moving on, this is the fabric that I'll be working with. As you can see, it has beautiful patterns on it, and the patterns are in different colors, as you can see. So I'm just going to work around the patterns like so. For the boning channels, I'm going to be using this yellow bias, so you can go ahead and use whatever fabric you want to use. This is the black lining that I'm going to be using for the top, and I'll be ironing my interfacing on my fabric and then use the fabric to cut out the lining. I'll be using this wording to give my cup a good structure. I have cut out all my pattern pieces on my fabric, and I also did the same for the lining. So to begin sewing, I'm going to be sewing my panel 1, 2, and 3 for the front together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After sewing, I'm just going ahead to press open the seams right here so that they lay flat and nice. I have done that right here, as you can see. This is the front. You can see how clean it looks. Next, I'm going to be sewing A and D together for my cups using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So once I'm done, I'm going to press open the seams like this so that they lay nice and flat. So after pressing the seams, I went ahead to cut off excess around that area. This is what it looks like in front. This is the second one. Next, I'm going to pin my upper cup piece to the lower cup piece like this. I'm done pinning them together. I'm going to repeat the same for the second one, and then I'm going to sew them together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Once I'm done sewing, I'm going to go ahead and give the seam a good press. So right here, I have ironed the seams, and I went ahead to trim off the excess around that area so that the cup relaxes well. This is what the front looks like. Next, I'm going to sew my panel 1 and 2 for the back together. After sewing, I'll give the seams right here a good press. So after ironing, this is what I have. Next, on the front, I'm going to place my yellow bias like this at the center, and then I'm going to trim off the excess that I don't need. Then I'm going ahead to pin the bias to the bodice like this so that it doesn't move. Next, I'm going to sew close to the edge of the bias like this. So right here, I'm sewing them together. After I'm done with this side, I'm going ahead to sew the other side too. So I'm going to cut off the excess bias after sewing. So guys, next I'm going to place my bias right on the seam lines to create my other boning channels. So here I have attached the bias on the seam lines for my boning channel. So I'm going to go ahead and pin my cups to my main piece. After pinning, I'm going to sew them like this using a 1/2 inch seam allowance that I added while cutting on my fabric. So I'm going to do the same for the second one. After sewing, guys, this is what it looks like, and this is the front. Next, I'm going to sew both my front and back side seams together by 1 inch. I'll do the same on the other side. So after sewing, this is what I have. Okay, so I went ahead and did the same thing on my lining. This is the lining. So to sew the neckline of the corset, I have placed the lining and the bodice good side to good side. Using my hemming gum, I'm going to sew the neckline together like this. This is so that after sewing, and once I give that area a good press, the hemming gum is going to make the neckline relax perfectly. So I'm just going ahead to sew using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'm going to sew all the way to the other part of the back neckline. So I've gone ahead to give the neckline a good press. As you can see, this is how it looks like, all laid out. This is the front. So next, I'm going to be inserting my boning, but before then, I'm going to trim off the edge of the boning so it doesn't poke me. Then I'm going to wrap the edge with my paper tape, guys, so it doesn't poke me further. So guys, I'm using a plastic boning in this case. Once I'm done wrapping the boning, I'm just going to push the boning inside the channel like this. It's so difficult right now, but I'm going to try. So after pushing the boning up to the edge like this, I'm going to trim off the excess boning, and then I'm going to pull out my boning a bit and cut off. This is because I don't want the boning to get into the hem. So I've gone ahead to fix the boning into the other channels. And next, I'm going to hem the top using the 1/2 inch seam allowance that I added right here. After sewing, I have gone ahead to trim off the excess around that area so that it relaxes well. Then I'm going to insert my hand right here and pull my fabric inside out like this. After pulling out the fabric, guys, this is what I have. So I'm just going to go ahead and give the fabric a good press and fix my zipper. So right here, I've fixed my zipper. I used the yellow zipper. I have given it a good press. This is the back and this is the front. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video so far. This is the end result. This is how it looks like on me. So guys, if you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and also please subscribe to the channel and turn on post notification for more videos. So guys, I will see you all in my next video. Bye.